Okay, so here's a predicament. I have these old Canon FD lenses. I've talked about them quite a bit on the channel before. They're just super cool vintage lenses. You've probably heard a lot of stuff about these on the internet, given that they are very close in nature to the Canon K35s, which are these like super expensive, really sought after cinema lenses. But these are much cheaper than that, obviously. Now the aspherical versions of these are really expensive now. They're going like for pretty pricey because people buy them and they rehouse them for cinema use. Now I have a pretty good set here. They are not the aspherical versions, but they're also not the normal kind of just L versions. Like this is a 24mm f1.4 and this is an L, not the aspherical, but this is like a really, really gorgeous lens. I think these go for like $6,000 or something like that on eBay used. They're like 40-year-old lenses. Anyways, I have a little set. I have the 24, I've got a Canon FDN 35mm f2. There's a concave version that's usually more sought after for this lens set. This is just the regular f2 version. I've got a 55mm f1.2, which I'm using right now, so I can't show you that one. And then I have the 85 f1.2. So really fast old vintage lenses with a ton of character, and you can cinevise them like this with like using a CinMod cap and a gear, and you can put EF mounts on them. And I've done that to most of my lenses here. 24, 35, 55 all have EF on it. I just haven't done it to my 85 yet because I just don't use the 85 very often. But this lens set is really cool. But here's the predicament. Most of the lenses in this set are really fast and have a similar coating to them and a similar look to them. They're bokeh rendition, their flares, so on and so forth. But the one oddball out is the 35mm. Now, if you know anything about the Canon FDs, you know that the 35mm really does not match the other set. It's just a much cheaper lens. They never made like an L version of it. They don't have anything faster than an f2. Like I said, they have the concave version, which is supposed to match a little more. But from all the testing that I've ever seen, the coating's just not the same. The 35s always have a more warm coating to them. And then the biggest downside is that you can't go to f1.4. Whereas like these other ones are f1.2s and f1.4. So they're really fast and it gives you a lot of character, that vintage bokeh, that like creaminess that comes through. The 35 just never matches. And so there's like been a ton of workarounds, like how do we put a 35 in the set? Because if you're using the Canon K35s, they actually made their own. The 35mm and the 18mm are special to the Canon K35. They didn't make these for stills lenses for old SLRs. So the 35 in the K35 set is a super speed. It's a T1.3 lens, which you're not gonna be able to get if you're trying to make a similar set using it just by modifying these old lenses. Always been an issue of mine. I've had these lenses for like 10 years and I've never been able to get a good 35 to match. This 35 is cool. This is a good 35, I gotta say, but it is at f2 and I often shoot Super 35, and so I like to shoot on the 35mm focal length quite often. I think if I shot more full frame, I'd probably just use the 55 f1.2, but like right now we're using my Komodo, and I use the speed booster a lot with the Komodo, but the problem is these old lenses, even after you convert them here, even after you put a nice CinMod back on it like this, when you focus, the back actually protrudes out. I've talked about this a bunch on the channel, but it comes out the back, and actually this lens element will hit the lens element on the speed booster, and then I can't use it. If you're using a full frame camera, no big deal. But say you still want a 35mm that matches, a full frame or Super 35 doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you still want a 35mm in your kit that can match the other lenses. So recently, I was watching Media Division's video over where they took their Canon FDs and they had GL Optics actually rehouse them for them. Well, what they do, their workaround to get a 35mm in the set is to put a wide angle adapter on top of a 50mm, then rehouse all that. So what this adapter does is it takes, here's a version of one. This is designed for like an old like HVX 200 or something like that. But basically they take another piece of glass and they take the 50mm and they widen it. And that way you can get that f1.2 aperture or that f1.4 aperture, whatever you prefer. And I was like, well, why don't I just do that? And then it turns out I'm not the only one that came up with this idea after watching it. So I do want to give a shout out to Caleb Brunkow. I think it's how you say your last name. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. He also made a video over this exact same subject. We did do different testing and stuff, but if you're really interested in the subject, definitely go check out his video. I'll have it linked up top and I'll have it linked down below so you can go watch his video. He tried to do a similar thing using a wide angle adapter on the FDL set. So I think he was using it on the 50 f1.4, whereas in my testing today, we're gonna be using on the 50 55 f1.2. So in theory, if I had put a wide angle adapter on a lens, I should be able to get an f1.2 aperture 35 millimeter that exactly matches the set because I'm using the same lens that's already in the set. One of my favorite lenses too, the 55 f1.2 is just a cool lens. So spoiler alert, we're actually shooting on the setup right now. So right now we're at an f2, which I know seems counterintuitive because this is a 35 f2. And we're putting, this is a 0.7x wide angle adapter, so it should take that 55, 0.7x, it should be somewhere close to the 35 millimeter range, maybe a little longer than that. Just look at this image though. And I'll show you the difference between this 35 f2. It's just not as cool. It just doesn't look as good. It doesn't have as much character. Great lens. It's actually a little sharper than the other lenses. It doesn't have a lot of contrast to it. I still use this lens all the time because if you're like in like a 3 foot or like a kind of meter range, it does look really nice. But once you go a little wider than that, it just kind of, it loses all of its like appeal. But look at this image right now. This is the 55 f1.2 with a wide angle adapter on, which we will talk about here in a second. So just for fun, let's open it up to f1.2 and really see what this background's gonna do and how it's gonna look. All right, opened up now. Let's see if I'm in focus. Barely. Look at that bokeh back there. That's that bokeh that I love so much. It's like this very, it's like a less opaque bubble bokeh, and it just looks so nice to me personally. So I'm able to get that now with just putting a little adapter on the lens. Now there are some caveats with this adapter, and we'll talk about that. I also have another adapter here that we can try out, which I have not tested yet. And so let's just experiment here and see what kind of results we get. Not a lot of 35 f1.2s on the market at all, just generally speaking, and let alone an old Canon FD vintage lens that can give you this kind of character. What's really fun about it, it's like you're gonna swing lens anyways, right? Say you're on the 55, you're getting some close-ups and you wanna go to 35 for, you know, some portrait shots or something. You're gonna have to swing a lens. So with this scenario, all you have to do is put this adapter, mount this adapter on the front of the lens, and it's like you just swung a lens. It does make the barrel size much bigger. So if you're using a matte box or using, you know, an ND filter, you are going to have to figure out how to get all that to work. Not a bad trade-off though, in my mind, to get something that looks like that. Okay, just to kind of show you the difference here, I just put the Canon FDN 35mm f2 on. We're at f2, much darker, obviously, given that it's an f2. And the bokeh in the background looks nice. Like it looks nice. Don't get me wrong. It looks pretty good, but you're not getting at all the shallow depth of field and character that you would get from the 55 with an adapter. So let's kind of show off this adapter real quick. Hopefully I stay in focus. We're shooting on a vintage lens here. No autofocus. I didn't want to use my LiDAR autofocus today because I didn't want to mess with any of these vintage lenses doing this test. But let's talk a little bit about these adapters and stuff. So the adapter that I'm using to do this, to convert it to a 35-ish millimeter, is a Century Precision Optics 0.7x adapter. Now this one was designed for the Canon XL1, which is a camera that came out so long ago. I think it's the camera, the XL1 or the XL2 shot 28 days later. Danny Boyle horror film. So this is designed because a lot of those cameras had kind of fixed lenses. You could change the lenses out, but you had a really small sensor, and a lot of times in order to go wider, you need an adapter that you could throw on the front of it. So this is designed for that. It's designed to spin and clamp onto the front of that lens. Now I believe this is a 72mm thread here. Now this is different than what Caleb did. He used basically the exact same adapter, but his was not designed for an XL1. So his had like a 62mm thread, and he was able to actually put some step-up rings inside here and clamp it down. Now I have literally like 10 step-up rings sitting here, and none of them actually fit perfectly. But I do think we could get this to work perfectly. But basically this is a 72mm, but it doesn't have like really nice threads to grip onto. So basically what I'm doing here is taking this 58 to 72mm, it goes inside there, and then I'm using a lens support to keep all this together. So ideally this would be maybe a little bigger than 72, and if you could get like a ring that actually had more lip on it, this would probably clamp onto it. But for this test today, just to see how it works before I really dial this in, this is what we're gonna do. So it basically just slides on there, no big deal, and now it's a 35. 55, 35, just like that. This is a really nice piece of glass here too. So even if it's not perfect, even if it's not a perfect 35 or there's a little distortion, it looks super cool. I have no complaints about that. If you want something that's like perfect, you're not gonna want to use a vintage lens anyways. So this is the way to just get some really fun looking images. That's the first thing that we're trying, is this precision optics. I bought this for like 45 bucks on eBay. And this is like a really nice piece of gear. This is like made out of metal, has really nice glass on it. It is like pristine, but because it's so old and no one uses XL ones anymore, they're only going for like 45 bucks. And the one that Caleb used was only like $35. So the problem is like there wasn't a lot available. I couldn't get the one that Caleb used. We chatted a little bit on Instagram trying to figure this out. Couldn't get the one he used, so I had to use the XL1 version, which is different. Probably a little bit easier to use because it does have a larger thread size on it, but I haven't been able to actually thread anything onto it yet. So in order to do that, I had to use this small rig lens support. Caleb uses too, just for the sake of the lens mount. This can support it so it doesn't, fall off or put too much weight on these old lenses that you may not want. And then of course, the front's pretty big, so if you want to get an ND on there, this one does have threads. You could put a variable ND on here, or you could use a matte box with a big OD. And that would be probably the best solution, is using a matte box, because then you can just slide that on and off and you don't have to really worry about the OD changing so much. You could use like a more flexible donut on the front and leave the matte box on at all times, which is just how you do it with big cinema lenses anyways. Something else that's interesting that Caleb did too. So this is the old 24 f1.4. It already has a 72mm front thread on it. So I bet this will just slide right in. Oof, it does. But I think the glass might hit. That's not great. My 24 has a little scratch on it, which is such a big bummer. It's probably really devalued the lens, but let's see if this will go on there. Yeah, so you definitely want to step up ring if you're going to use a 24 with this one. The glass touches, so you probably want a little bit of a gap in between there, which will probably change the optics a little bit, but a little gap in there would be nice so these two lenses don't touch each other. But if you want to try to get an 18mm look, you could also try to adapt your 24 to get that 18mm look. Not something I really care about that much. Do I really need an 18mm vintage lens very often? Probably get another one. They actually make a 20mm FD already, which I think is a really cool lens. And it's also like a 1.4 or something. It's like a really fast, maybe it's an f2, but it's a 20mm, so that's really cool. I love this idea that you can just throw on an adapter at any given point and change what your lens is doing. Why don't we do this more often? We do it with anamorphic adapters sometimes, but never really talk about it with spherical, because it's like, well, just get another lens. But sometimes you don't have the ability to, and this might be cheaper. $40 to get a whole other lens, 45 bucks to adapt a lens and turn it into a different focal length. You're always gonna have caveats putting glass in front of the lens, but a lot of times it's really just not a big deal. Like in this scenario, it's not a big deal at all. So the caveats here, obviously you have to use this lens support, which makes it hard to focus because when you focus on an FD lens, the lens moves back and forth because it's not a cinema lens. The focus is happening externally, not internally. If you can get the rings to work, like if I'm going to try to get some rings that actually make it where this mount can clamp onto it, that focus issue will go away because it can move with the barrel just like it should. That's just not what we're able to do right now in today's test, unfortunately. I say let's try to get some other shots with it, like some close-ups, maybe go outside, see what it looks like up into some trees or something like that. How I'm doing this and not worrying about the ND right now is that I'm actually using a drop-in ND filter. So we're shooting Super 35 on the Red Komodo, and I've got a drop-in ND, a variable ND behind it. I don't normally like to do this. I normally like to have an infrared cut filter on the front, so on and so forth. I could do that with a matte box. I just didn't want to deal with that right now, but that's what you could do if you try to do this same setup. This is obviously so vibey. So much aberration going on. You know, it's probably more than I would have wanted. You can see it stretching. I think it's really cool. But if you're going for like perfect optics, not something you'd probably want to use. Let's see. At f2 though, which just should make everything look more normal anyways. Whoa, it's really stretching on the sides. Even kind of adjusting it doesn't really change it. It's pretty fascinating. You do get infinity focus, and you can get pretty dang close as well. So, I call this like the vibe adapter. Let's shoot at f1.2. Let's see if I can get in focus as well by doing this. It's pretty rad. At f1.2 on the 55 as is, it's not like anything's really that sharp anyways. Okay, let's try it at like a 1-2 split. So there's actually some sharpness happening. I don't know where that's at. You know, the more I'm looking at it out here, like you can really sense the like distortion that's going on here. It makes it kind of like a dream lens sort of situation. I don't know if a lot of people would want to use this. I wonder if this is more of like an effect. Oh, there is a dog barking. Because you can see it kind of stretching on the edges. Like some like barrel distortion or something. It's probably less than ideal, to be honest. Does it look cool? Yes. Like no getting around that. This is why this is an experiment. So I'm just kind of leaving the lens support a little loose, like with some friction, and I'm able to focus back and forth, and it's not moving enough to like have the adapter jump off or anything. Like I said, if you actually get a better step-up ring, you can clamp this on, this won't be an issue. But for the sake of testing, this is what we're doing. So, kind of see like a phone close-up here. Oh, dropped it off. Okay, maybe this is a good time to see what the 55 looks like kind of on its own. So this is obviously a lot tighter at 1-2. We can go to a 2 split almost here. And now we'll just throw that adapter back on. You can really see what it looks like. Yeah, you can see how much wider I am. And the focus plane does change. Now I have to come all the way up here to be in focus. So yeah, so similar field of view. Let's also go grab the 35mm again so we can see the differences between the two. And I think a lot of people might just consider getting the 35mm f2 as is after really looking at these tests. If you want this vibe though, this is fun, 45 bucks, you can get this vibe added to a 55 and not have to spend money on a 35, which those go for like, I don't know, 250 bucks, 300 bucks. The concave would be close, like much more money since it is more said to be closer match. So consider that. Let's grab the 35 and put that on. Bokeh at f2. Your aperture is not gonna be as big. It's not gonna look quite as interesting, but it's obviously gonna be more optically the way that you would expect. Now there might be other wide angle adapters that work better. There might be some on the market that actually give you perfect optics. This one's not seeming to do that. There's some sort of distortion going on. It's probably because this adapter was designed to be a wide angle adapter, but for the XL1, which had like a very small sensor, like a 2/3 inch sensor or something like that. And so it's probably not designed to go this like wide. It's probably only supposed to be like cropped into the center of this. So the one that Caleb used did also have some weird distortion like this as well, but maybe his was actually designed for bigger lenses. So I think the trick here is trying to get one that's actually designed for Super 35 versus one that's designed for a 2/3 inch sensor. If you want this wacky look, get this one. If you want something better, you might have to spend more money. I saw some on eBay, they were like 300 bucks. Maybe those would work. I don't really know, but this is a fun thing to maybe go find yourself. And if I find more stuff, I will try to update you guys in the future. Because it'll also be fun to really see this on full frame, which we have not been able to try out You know what? Let's try that out. I'll put the speed booster on. I will focus it in a way that does not ruin the lenses, and we'll see kind of how it looks even wider. It's gonna look pretty wacky. Okay, that's really cool. The speed booster, it's rad. Carries at 1.2, barely in focus, but you know, pretty rad with the speed booster. Wow. I'm like foot from the lens right now. Wacky. Let's go to f2. Just for comparison, let's take off the adapter, see how that looks. All right, so we're 55 1.2. Before we get any further, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to present your work online. Start a completely personalized website with the new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint. Choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up. Maybe you want to start an online store to sell your photography or other products. Squarespace has the built-in functionality to get one of those up and running quickly, and I've actually been using Squarespace to run my online stores for almost a decade now. Make checkout seamless for your customers with simple but powerful payment tools, accept credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay, and in eligible countries offer customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. And of course, if you're like me, you're probably looking to build a portfolio, which Squarespace has tons of features for that very thing. You can even create private galleries for client work using these tools. So if you're looking for a home for your work, you can do that with Squarespace. Click the link in the description to get 10% off, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, so conclusion, fun piece of kit, sort of does what I was trying to do, not exactly. Maybe there are some other adapters out there that can solve this problem, but that's what's fun about cinematography and doing this, is that we get to experiment, try new things like this, try new effects, and get a different look. Try to get a different look that you normally couldn't get, and not an off-the-shelf look, right? Like this is all happening in camera, and it's using just like 50 bucks to make it happen. So I think it's really important to always try new things in cinematography and experiment like this. So if it's something you want to do, I hope this helps you. Once again, thank you to Caleb and then also Media Division for kind of showing us that this is possible and kind of taking me down this rabbit hole. Definitely go watch Caleb's video if you want to learn more, because he did make a similar video before me and I don't want to take any of the credit. We just both had the exact same idea at the exact same time, but you can see different results on our videos. So go check out his video as well. Subscribe to his channel if you haven't. Not entirely sure how I'm gonna use this in the future, but it seems really neat and I hope to experiment with it some more. So as always, guys, until next time, I'm Mr. Sakurai. See ya. 35 f1.2.